Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, and Happy New Year everyone! I mean, it's not the New Year for me, I still got a few hours left before midnight, but it's New Year in other parts of the world, and I'm sure when I'm uploading this, it's probably going to be Saturday when you finally watch it, so you know what? Happy New Year regardless, and what better way to ring in 2022 than by discussing the 27th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, again, kind of going into the background of this movie, for me at least, after the events of Far From Home, many people were left wondering what the hell was going to happen for the next Spider-Man movie. After all, at the end of Far From Home, Peter's identity was publicly outed to the world, and he was blamed for Mysterio's crimes. And as a result, you just knew that there was no way it was going to be hard for Peter to come back from that. And adding on the stuff that happened in the real world, with Sony Marvel having their disagreements and both companies briefly splitting up before coming to a new deal, many people were left wondering where the webhead situation was going to end up after everything that happened in this movie. As such, a lot of questions were being raised. On top of that, though, as people were wondering what was going to be happening for the sequel, more leaks began coming out about people that were being cast in it, with one example being that Jamie Foxx was apparently going to be coming back in the film as Electro. And for those that don't know, he played Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and many people were wondering why would they do that, considering that film was a flop. But again, I thought he did pretty decently in that film with the material he had. So I thought, and honestly, considering it was MCU, I thought it would that would give him a good chance. But little by little, more people who had played previous Spider-Man villains were being cast again and again. And as a result, many people were like, wait, are they bringing in previous villains altogether? And as a result, a lot more hype was being built up around the movie, including rumors of certain other characters appearing in it. And as a result, everybody wanted to see this movie, myself included. Now, admittedly, I had no idea if the film was going to rock or if it was going to suck. While I love Spider-Man, even I admit them, and while I love the MCU, even I admit the films can kind of waver in terms of quality, especially in the case of the Spider-Man movies. I love the MCU Spider-Man films. Homecoming is still fun. Far From Home I thought was a nice way of showing him maturing more, especially after the events of Endgame. But at the same time, I didn't really know what to expect for the next Spider-Man movie. And while I would have been hyped if some of the rumors surrounding certain characters in the film were true, I wanted to go in with an open mind. I wanted to be sure that the film even if those rumors weren't true, considering all the other people they had cast in the film, I thought I was going to have a good time regardless. So I was genuinely interested in seeing where it went. And sure enough, when the film was close to release, a lot of hype went around it. A lot of people wanted to see this movie. People bought their tickets like 2 weeks in advance for it in that little event called Spider-Man, called Spider Monday, which is supposed to line up with Cyber Monday. It was just the people were just wanting more, just desperately wanted to see this movie. Now, admittedly, I did not reserve a ticket. I wound up seeing the film the weekend of release on Sunday. And I got lucky by buying a seat that had not been pit claimed yet, and even then it was lucky because that was just like a single seat. So, and the rest of the theater, and even then the rest of the theater was packed. So, again, lucky. So, and after I saw the film, I was like, holy crap. I, honest to God, thought it was amazing. And even after I finished watching it, I just wanted to rant and rave and gush about it to anyone who would listen. And I had to try and keep my mouth shut, and if I did tell anyone, it had to be anyone that didn't care. So, again, it was like one of those big movies. So I was, honest to God, really looking forward to it for these vlogs. But again, that was opening weekend. 2 weeks have passed since I saw it for the first time, so a lot of the hype that was built up from that first viewing has gone down a bit. And as such, now that I'm seeing it now on New Year's Eve, is the film still really good? Well, let's talk about it. And again, spoilers are abound in this video, people. Part of these vlogs are that I go over the entire plot for the movie, beginning to end. So I'm going to go over every single twist and detail that occurs in this movie, and I have to just say this right now, and I mean that more with this vlog than with any other. If you have not seen No Way Home, Turn away now. I say that with every MCU film, and I mean it with every MCU film, because if you genuinely have not seen any of those movies and don't want them spoiled for you, then I don't want you watching these vlogs until after you've seen them. But with this film especially, the twists are so big that I say right now, don't even dare watching this video until you've seen the movie for yourself. I don't care if you don't care. I am not going to be the guy that spoils it for you, okay? Okay. Now that that's taken care of, and if you stop, for those of you who are still around, I hope you've seen the movie, and I hope you enjoy this long-ass video, because I know well in advance it's going to be long, and you probably do too. So let's just get this over with our plot summary. And by the way, just fair warning, I do have written notes, so I will sometimes be pulling these up while talking, because there are some points that I did write down. So anyway, yeah. In terms of continuity, No Way Home picks up exactly where Far From Home ended, with Peter Parker's secret identity being outed right while he's in the middle of Times Square, after having swung around with MJ. And of course, we immediately see the fallout as we see Peter reacting with his what the fuck when he sees Mysterio out him, though the fuck is censored. And as a result, the crowd is all just going nuts when they see that, especially when they see MJ there. Keep saying, "Oh, is she your girl? Hey, are you Spider-Man's girlfriend?" One girl actually starts, and one girl says that she's that she's in with a murderer, and and tries to manhandle her, which results in Spider-Man smacking that lady's side and her claiming assault, though she doesn't use those words, but yeah. And as a result, Peter grabs MJ and just swings away, but unfortunately, no matter where they go, there's someone waiting there for them. They get to the top. They get to the top of a bridge. There's news helicopters there watching them. They swing through New York. There are people out there just saying, "Oh my God, it's Spider-Man! You're Peter Parker, right?" And eventually gets to the point where they eventually have to hide out in Peter's apartment. And Unfortunately, it's kind of an awkward moment, as Aunt May and Happy Hogan have, well, broken up. And they're unfortunately... Hold on a second. Sorry about that. That was distracting. And anyway, yeah, so they broken up, and they hear Peter and MJ coming in, and they walk in as Peter's getting undressed, so they assume that they were getting ready for sex. But while Peter's getting all awkward about them breaking up, unfortunately, that's when they realize that Peter's identity has been outed, as all the news helicopters are right outside their apartment. So, yeah, things kind of get out of hand very quickly, especially since shortly after everyone's heard the news, Damage Control, that Stark subsidiary that pretty much deals with the aftermath of superhero battles, they come in and arrest Peter Parker on the allegations. And while they do end up questioning him, Ned, MJ, and Aunt May about everything, ultimately the charges are dropped. In no part thanks to the timely intervention of their lawyer, Matt Murdock, who is, yes, played by the same actor who portrayed him in the Netflix series. As such, the good Mr. Murdock does tell Peter that while none of the charges will stick, unfortunately, public opinion is very much down the middle, as half the people who saw the video don't believe a word of what Mysterio said, while the other half are very much with him and think that Spider-Man is a murderer. As a result, for safety reasons, Peter and Aunt May end up moving into Happy's apartment, as it's in a better part of town, has higher security. Pretty much everything will just be better. Though again, Peter's daily life is a little in the tubes, as again half the populace all think that he's a murderer, while the other half are supporting him. And it of course gets to work, and of course it's affecting his daily life as well, as he goes to school. The students again 50-50 with the students, and it's especially with the teachers, as when Peter goes in, there are the 3 teachers there. A couple of them have set up a shrine, while the other is just outright calling Peter a murderer, and then he believes Mysterio. So as such, to kind of get away from it, he and MJ do kind of rest on top of the school, though Ned comes to join them to ruin the moment. As such, after they all have a conversation, after they all just kind of talk, they all talk about where they want to go for college, and of course, they all have their hearts set on MIT, and they think that they're also accepted. They'll go there together. It'll all be nice. Unfortunately, though, that's easier said than done, as we see the months go by little by little, as we see Peter continue getting acceptance letters from all the schools he applied for, including the backups, and one by one, they all reject him. And as such, it finally gets close to the holidays, and so Peter, MJ, and Ned all get letters from MIT and all of them got rejected because of the controversy surrounding Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Though Flash got in, this movie has Flash at his utter douchiest because he's trying to cash in on Peter Parker being Spider-Man, and what I find hilarious is the fact that he dyed his hair blonde, so I guess it's supposed to look more like the comics Flash, which, I don't know, it's just another way of showing just how much of a D-bag he is, so I love it's a double-edged sword. It's annoying but hilarious at the same time. But bottom line, yeah, Peter is feeling super guilty because while he would understand that it would affect him badly, at the same time, because even though he's denying the charges, the fact that MJ and Ned are also suffering just because they know him, it's getting to him, and it's hurting him badly, and he just wants to know how he can fix it, how he can undo this. And that's when inspiration hits. For you see, when they each got their letters, they all met up at this diner that MJ works at, and the diner didn't take down their Halloween decorations yet. And as Peter looks up at the decorations, he sees a string of lights all designed after a wizard. And that's when Peter decides that he's going to get some mystical help. As such, Peter travels to the Sanctum Sanctorum and meets up with Doctor Strange, who we learn is not the Sorcerer Supreme anymore. As it turns out that in the 5 years that he got blipped, Wong inherited the role, so while Doctor Strange was put back in charge of the Sanctum, Wong is now in charge of more higher stuff, so he isn't going to stick around and help Strange with all of his with his day-to-day mumbo-jumbo stuff. As such, while they're shoveling up snow because apparently one of the corridors had a snowstorm and so they're all getting rid of it, Peter tries talking to Doctor Strange and says maybe he could go back in time and stop Mysterio from revealing my identity, and Doctor Strange says that he can't do that. One, it's a bad idea altogether because they already destabilized the space-time continuum to undo what Thanos did, but on the top of that, even if he wanted to do that, they don't have the Time Stone anymore. It'd be impossible. As such, Peter is kind of stuck. As such, Peter mumbles how he kind of how no matter what he do, he can't think of anything. How he wishes everyone forget. I forgot the dialogue, but that bit of word choice does make Doctor Strange think back towards a certain spell, something called the Runes of Kefkal. Essentially, that's a spell that, when cast properly, can erase collective knowledge and memory. Of course, it's a very risky spell, and when Wong hears that Doctor Strange wants to cast it, he tells him no, there's no much that's going to cause some major backlash. That's not going to work. Of course, and Strange counters that they've used it for less serious stuff, including like this weird party at Ramakush, at this weird party. And even Strange admits that Peter's gone through enough, so maybe he can go through. So maybe it's best that they do this for him. And so Wong reluctantly decides. Wong reluctantly agrees, though he says that he wants nothing to do with it. As such, Strange brings Peter down to the, I want to say, basement level of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Again, they had a word for it, but it's essentially meant to be the center of an interdimensional nexus. It's where all these ancient way lines from across reality meet, and it's more magically sensitive. As such, it's here that they'll cast the spell with the Runes of Kefkal. As such, Strange gets ready to cast a spell, and Peter's all happy and joyful, but then Strange says, "See you around, Spider-Man." And that makes Peter concerned, especially since, wait, what do you mean? And so Doctor Strange reveals that when he does cast the spell, everyone on Earth will forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, including the people that know him. As a result, Peter is worried. As such, he tells the Strange and talks about, well, what about my girlfriend? What about Ned? What about my Aunt May? And so with each edition, Strange begins altering the spell, creating another rung so that everybody on Earth will forget except for the people in his circle. And of course, but Peter continues adding alterations like Happy Hogan, like putting in Happy Hogan, or all these putting in Happy Hogan. And the fact that he just keeps making all these alterations is causing the spell to get harder and harder to control. While Doctor Strange continually tells Peter to shut up, just let him cast the spell, Peter keeps talking and talking until finally the spell gets so out of hand that it begins affecting where they are, causing the structures to all break down, them to show like what looks like reality and this weird purple fog all around them. And in the chaos, Peter just yells out, because I did write this down, "Everyone that knew I was Spider-Man before should still know." And with that, the spell is cast and almost goes haywire, but Strange is thankfully able to contain it and restore everything to normal. As such, he begins just immediately scolding Peter because that was a stupid move. That should not have happened. He should not have done that. And Peter is just, of course, apologetic and being all sorry. And Strange does calm down and say, yeah, I keep forgetting that with everything we've been through, I'm still forgetting you're still a kid. I'm sorry. And I'm sure that if the people at MIT rejected you and you did everything you could, and then there must be, and that's just the way things are. Because, yeah, Peter did say that they got rejected from MIT. And then Peter responds with, wait, what? And it turns out, yeah, Strange assumed that he called MIT before coming to him to see if he could make a case for himself. And the instant he learns that Peter didn't do that, he's even more pissed, which resulted in him kicking the good Mr. Parker out of the sanctum. As such, armed with this new knowledge, Peter decides he might as well act on it. And so he calls Flash, who earlier, after he got accepted, bragged about how he was going to like an acceptance party. And after making a bit of negotiations, Flash tells him that the head of MIT admissions is currently on her way to the airport. And if Peter can catch her before she gets there, he might be able to plead a case for himself, Ned, and MJ. As such, Peter goes there in the Iron Spider suit, manages to meet the lady on the freeway, and he does try and talk her down, saying, Look, I'm stupid. I don't want to do that. But Ned and MJ didn't do any of this, so please don't be stupid like me and consider giving them a shot. And of course, it's not helping his case because he did not prepare this at all. But then Peter's spider sense starts tingling, and suddenly he can hear his booming coming from further in the freeway. And yeah, I have to mention that the freeway's on a bridge. And as he hears booming, he gets on top of the admissions lady's car, and he sees people running away. The booming is getting closer. He tells anybody that's still there to make a run for it, which a good chunk of people on the bridge take his advice. And as it gets closer, we see something under the bridge, something that's breaking through the concrete, something that's coming through. And as it gets closer, we see a metal tentacle slam onto the pavement. And we soon see the tentacle's owner. Ladies and gentlemen, behold the MCU introduction of Dr. Otto Octavius, a.k.a. Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina from Spider-Man 2. And based on his dialogue, it's the same Doc Ock, because the instant he sees Peter, because at this point Peter's suited up, he says, "Hello, Peter," and wants to know where the hell his machine is. Because in Spider-Man 2, his big plan was to create this reactor that was supposed to create like a mini sun. And him creating that was ultimately what made the accident that fused his arms to his body and made him Doc Ock. And his big plan in that movie was to recreate it. And sure enough, he wants to know where the hell it is. MCU Peter is of course clueless to this, but Doc Ock isn't exactly listening, and so they get into a fight, with Peter getting serious after Doc Ock mentions how he should have killed his little girlfriend. As such, Peter and him actually get into a really badass fight as we see Doc Ock using his arms to throw around cars, Peter having to dodge them, try webbing them up, save anybody that's still in their friggin' cars after seeing the man with the metal tentacles coming at them. But unfortunately, as the battle continues on, in the chaos, the MIT admissions director's car got slammed into one of the guardrails of the bridge and is now teetering over the side of it. And as such, Peter now has to prioritize between fighting Doc Ock and saving her. And as a result, he eventually and while her car does end up going over, Peter manages to web it and attach it to the bridge, so she's safe. But unfortunately, Doc Ock is not exactly giving Peter any room to breathe, so as a result, he does manage to take advantage of it, and he grabs Peter, throws him around, and even slams him into the side of one of the pillars of the bridge. And as such, in the battle, he manages to rip off the chest plate of Peter's suit, and the nanotechnology from the suit is integrated into his tentacles, which he himself finds fascinating. As such, with this in mind, he decides to land a killing blow on Peter, but before one of his tentacles can stab him through, his suit managed to reconfigure itself to recover the chest plate, which ultimately exposes Peter's face, since that's the material it used to cover him up. And the instant Otto sees his face, he's like, "Wait, who the hell are you?" Of course, Peter's even more confused by this, but all those questions are immediately tabled as suddenly the tentacle that tried stabbing Peter starts moving back and flexing against Otto's wishes. And it turns out that that Otto absorbing that part of the suit, big dum-dum on his part, because now his tentacles are synced up with the Iron Spider suit, which means Peter now controls them. And as such, while Otto is desperately trying to regain control of his tentacles, Peter instead uses them to grab the MIT and mission lady's car and put it safely back on the bridge, while also bringing Otto up with him. The MIT lady says that that Peter's a hero, that she'll work on getting Ned, MJ, and Peter another chance at getting into MIT before she storms off and yells at to Otto for the danger she put him in. As such, Peter's immediately starts questioning Otto about what the heck's going on, how does he know him, etc. But once again, all those questions get tabled as his spider sense tingles again. This time, there's another visitor. As Peter and Otto look to the other end of the bridge, and here's something metal clattering to the ground. As the camera plans in closer, it's a pumpkin bomb. And with the explosion and in the smoke, we see its owner come through. As once again, just as Otto was from Spider-Man 2, we see the reappearance of the Green Goblin from Spider-Man 1, who immediately sees Peter and Otto and rushes in to fight before they can continue. One of Doctor Strange's portals comes in and grabs Peter and Otto, bringing Peter to what is later described as a magic dungeon. Peter, of course, is clueless, but which is filled with all these magical cages, one of which has Otto in it, and another has another resident. In this case, the Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man 1. Peter is just as confused about his appearance as he is about Otto and the Green Goblins, but Strange comes in to fill Peter in on what's going on. And it's clear that he's kind of been in battle, as he's got like a gash, he looks winded, his hair's all messed up, as such, Strange pretty much tells Peter what happened. The spell Peter cast, it went more wrong than they thought it did. When Peter said, again, going back to the line, everyone that knew it was Spider-Man before should still know, it wound up screwing with the spell on a major scale, as instead of erasing the world's knowledge of Peter Parker as Spider-Man, it instead started bringing everyone from every universe who knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man into the MCU. Now, thankfully, Strange was able to quell the spell before it could get out of hand, but unfortunately, a few stragglers still slipped through. In this case, Otto, the Green Goblin, and the Lizard. All three of them have slipped through, and it's clear that, based on the way they're talking, there's the possibility that more could have slipped through. So yeah, these aren't just the original actors reprising their roles for another universe. These are the original actors reprising the same roles from the original movies. So yeah, that's awesome. It's great. And once I saw the trailers, I and everyone else collectively went nuts. And it's so cool to see them again in these movies, especially with them interacting and talking, because when it comes down to when it came down to the previous Spider-Man films, it was usually like one villain per movie, maybe 2 or 3 if they really wanted to jam characters in there. But as such, having these pre-established villains from previous continuities in the same room together and actually working off each other, especially since some of them know each other because of their history as supervillains, it's actually pretty fun. It's awesome, especially considering that for some of these characters, others are dead. Case in point, when Otto first saw the Green Goblin come in, he called him Osborn. And later in the movie, when Spidey is hunting for the Green Goblin, Otto says, "No, there's no way it could be him. He's dead. So either that guy isn't who you think he is, or you're fighting a ghost." So they do showcase that the film still happened, and that for many of these characters, a lot of the original deaths still occurred. So they're just as confused about their appearance as other people. So it's just really damn cool to see these characters from all these villains from different films brought together, especially since, unlike the previous Spider-Man movies where they tried jamming a bunch of villains into one movie, this time, because they're the exact same versions of those characters from those previous movies, we know their history. We know who they are. We know their motivations, who they are as people, what they want, etc. And so the movie, and as such, Spider-Man No Way Home does not have to do a lot to establish them. They have to get them in, and and while they do have to give some like basic stuff to try and get people up to speed, they do it. We are, like I said, we already know these characters. It's like when we went into the Avengers and they didn't give a lot of introductions to all the heroes. Because they had already had those movies prior, you knew who these characters were. All you had to do was bring them together and see them interacting. And that's what No Way Home is doing with these villains. Bringing them in, seeing them work off each other, and just letting it play out. And it's fun. It's just glorious and fun to see. But fan gushing aside, Strange realizes that they need to undo this. The fabric of reality is already brittle as it is, so if they want to fix this, they need to fix it fast, because that. And while Strange is aware of the Lizard and Doc Ock, Peter does tell him about the Green Goblin and where he came in and where he was, and as a result, Strange says you got to go find him, and to give him an edge, he modifies one of Peter's web shooters, like this gauntlet from the Iron Spider suit. Essentially, whoever he shoots with it is zapped into one of the magical cages. So all he has to do is just find any more visitors from other universes, zap them, and boom, they're back in the mystical dungeon. And Peter agrees to it, but he says that he wants MJ and Ned's help, which Doctor Strange reluctantly agrees to. As such, Ned and MJ are brought in, and they immediately begin searching the internet for any sightings of the Green Goblin, because after all, guy in a Green Goblin suit flying on a glider, kind of hard to miss, especially in the Marvel Universe. However, they do end up, and while they can't find anything on the Goblin, they do find something about a strange flying man in the woods. And so Peter decides to suit up and check it out, though he has to turn his suit inside out because earlier in the movie, a Mysterio believer threw green paint at him and it messed up the suit. So, while Peter couldn't clean it himself, he just decides to turn it inside out, which makes it look a nice black and gold color. I dig it. It's cool. As such, Peter swings out to the woods to see what the disturbance is, and sure enough, he runs into not one, but two new villains from previous films. In this case, the flying man he saw is Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, who is clearly not all there. Well, literally in this case, as while we see him all glowing in blue, he's not manifested fully yet. So when Peter tries zapping him, the blast just goes right through his body and ends up hitting a tree. But he's clearly conscious enough to recognize Spider-Man as he immediately tries zapping him. But that's when the second supervillain comes in to lend a hand. In this case, the Sandman, who immediately thinks that Spider-Man is his Peter Parker. Of course, Peter says, "No, I'm not him. I'm someone else." But for now, they've got the glowing blue guy to deal with. So Spidey ends up telling Sandman to keep him in place while he cuts off his power source because he's absorbing power from various electrical wires. And so the Sandman is able to contain Mysterio in a sandstorm, and Peter is able to unplug the currents, which in turn cuts off Electro's power. However, as he begins materializing, it's not back to the blue guy that we saw in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but rather his human form. Although he looks a little bit better, because again, if you haven't seen Amazing Spider-Man 2, Electro before he got his powers was essentially just this nerdy dorka doofus who was just so weird and out of the way that pretty much everybody ignored him. His hair was slicked back, his teeth were, crooked. Sorry, and he definitely just kind of looked like a dweeb. Here, he looks more toned. His hair is a bit more slicked back, and he's got a beard. And they state the reason why he looks like his normal self is because the energy in the MCU reality is different from those in the Amazing reality, so it's stabilized him more. But with him having a physical form, Peter is able to zap him and send him back to Doctor Strange's dungeon. And the Sandman, not knowing what the hell it was, begins questioning Peter, and since he's not the same guy that he knew, he doesn't trust him and almost attacks him, but Peter zaps him as well. So he's pretty much got he's gotten two more villains in there. As such, Peter realized that he still needs to find the Green Goblin, that he's out there somewhere and things aren't getting out of hand, and he might be causing trouble. And, well, speak of the devil, he does show up at a homeless shelter. Specifically, the homeless shelter that Aunt May is working at. Which, nice little fun fact, it's a feast center. Which feast is actually essentially the shelter for homeless people in the Marvel universe. It was set up by Mr. Negative's alter ego, Martin Lee. So again, I like that, especially since in the Spider-Man video game, Aunt May did work there. So I like that little detail. And Norman Osborn is scared. You see, prior to him arriving there, Norman Osborn's consciousness did come back to the surface, because the thing in the first Spider-Man, in the Raimi Spider-Man movie, it was essentially a dual personality. It was a kind of a DID caused by the accident that gave him his powers. As a result, Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin aren't the same person. They're just two minds inhabiting the same body. And while the Goblin sees the fact that they're in another universe as a new opportunity for them to conquer and cause all kinds of mayhem, Norman is in fact scared and has no idea what the hell is going on. He's able to piece enough together to know that he's not in his home universe because his apartment has other people living in it. Oscorp doesn't exist here, and he can't find any records of Harry existing. So he's just freaked out and scared, and so. The only reason he went to Feast is because he saw advertising involving Spider-Man for there, and he needs his help. As such, Aunt May takes pity on him and is the one that called Peter. And while Peter does show up immediately, he doesn't think that he tries to tell Aunt May that it's not their problem, that they just have to send him back and everything will be all hunky-dory and fine. And Aunt May isn't exactly happy about this, but she trusts Peter, though she does tell him that he clearly does need help and that he trusts Peter, so maybe he should. And considering who he is, it may be best to try and help him because he's scared. Again, Peter thinks that it'd be better if he just sent him home. So as such, May drops Peter and Norman off at the Sanctum Sanctorum, and Peter brings him down to the basement where he sees all the other supervillains. And sure enough, Norman Norman and Otto actually recognize each other, which is not out of the realm of possibility. Norman Osborn was the head of Oscorp, and Otto Octavius was a brilliant scientist. I think it would make sense for them both to at least be aware of each other. So I do like that. But of course, Strange immediately walks in and sees Norman and immediately zaps him into his own little cage. And it turns out he's actually got something to help reverse the spell. This weird box, I forgot what it was called, that is the spell is contained in. Essentially, the box is supposed to be a magic undo button. The spell is contained within the box, and all he has to do is unlock the combinations, press a button, and the spell will immediately be undone, and all these villains will be sent back to their home universes. So everything just seems all hunky-dory. Everything looks like everything's going to be solved. Everything's going to be fine until the villains start talking. As they pretty much all of them are comparing notes between their universes and everything. Especially do love is that the lizard actually recognizes Electro which shows that there actually was someone in the Amazing Universe Oscorp that did know who Electro was. I'm just going to say his name is Max Dillon, that's his real name, who actually recognized him and knows who he is. And even the lizard's like, what the hell happened to you? And they're just pretty much, and they all are just talking, and Doc Ock once again drops that Norman is supposed to be dead. Something that even Norman's like, what the hell at? But at the same time, and as he begins questioning this, sure enough, Sandman confirms the story. And not just that, he confirms that Doc Ock is supposed to be dead too, drowned at the bottom of a river with his machine. Otto, of course, thinks this is ludicrous, as the last thing he remembers is fighting Spider-Man with one of his tentacles around his neck. But then his mind goes blank, and he suddenly realizes, oh crap, I died. And then sure enough, when more villains begin thinking about it, particularly Electro, as he talks about, I was fighting Spider-Man too. I had him, I was getting juiced up, I was about to become pure energy, and then, oh crap, I died too. And so that's when Peter hears this, he's like, wait, what, do most of you die? As such, he brings this up to Doctor Strange, and he tells him, and he says that if they send them back, a good chunk of these guys are probably going to die. But Strange does not care. In his own words, In the grand calculus of the universe, their sacrifice means more than their lives. Put simply, yes, they will die, but it's the way of things. This is just how it goes. They're destined to fall to Spider-Man, and even if it's sad, that's not their problem. They have to focus on they have to focus on keeping the fabric of reality stable, which means, unfortunately, some of these people have to die. And Peter isn't taking that shit. And so, as such, while Strange is the box all organized and is about ready to undo the spell, Peter grabs the box of the web line and pulls it to him and says sorry and runs out of the Sanctum Sanctorum with Doctor Strange in hot pursuit. Which brings us to, honestly, another really cool scene in the movie, the Spider-Man on Doctor Strange fight scene. It is, honest to God, a really damn cool fight scene, especially as we see Strange utilizing more of his magic and abilities to try and outwit Spider-Man, and Spidey in turn outwitting him with his own abilities. Like, first thing he does is that he tries to use a portal he tries to use a sling ring to open gateways to keep Peter distracted or keep him in place, but Peter works around that. He manages to pull Peter in and tries to shoot his astral horn out of his body so he can grab the box. Thanks to Peter's spider sense, his body is just instinctively moving the box out of his way. As such, even when Peter gets back into his body, Doctor Strange sends his cloak after him to throw him around, and then to finally make sure that they can go all out without everything going crazy, he throws Peter into the mirror dimension. And if you watch my previous vlogs in the MCU perspectives, you know that the mirror dimension is where all the awesome stuff happens, because everything gets all twisty and weird and just nuts to see, and it's just so creative and fun to watch to see Spidey trying to maneuver through this place, but Strange just casually walking through. It's just so awesome, especially as things get more twisty. We see structures from New York just multiplying and coming together, spreading out across the area to the point where it somehow belongs to the Grand Canyon, and they're fighting on top of a train and across this vast landscape of rocks and buildings. It's just so damn cool to watch. It's just awesome and amazing. But even through all this, Peter is trying to talk Strange down, tell him, look, we have to fix this. We have to help these people. What if we could make them better so they don't end up dying? But Strange says, I'm sorry, but they have to go. As it's ultimately, Doctor Strange is able to use another combination of his sling ring gateways and his cape to get the box away from Peter. But just as Strange is about to get it, Peter notices something about the mirror dimension. Hold on, I again wrote it down. I forget that's something called an Archimedean spiral. And since Peter's good at math, he's able to figure out a way of beating Strange as he uses the principles of the Archimedean spiral to create a bunch of connecting web lines. And as Strange opens a sling ring portal back to the basement, all the webs come together and trap and web up Strange, allowing Peter to just swing in, grab the box, and as an extra measure to ensure Strange doesn't follow him, he takes his sling ring and leaves, telling him, sorry, but I have to try and fix these people. And yeah, Peter's now kind of stuck. Well, though Strange is stuck too. Sorry, getting a drink right now. Thirsty. But yeah, Peter realizes in for a penny, in for a pound. He's got to try and find a way to fix all these guys, because if he doesn't, there's a good chance a lot of them will die, and, well, they don't want that. So yeah, Peter realizes that they can't keep them in the dungeon anymore. And sure enough, there are some of them that do want to cooperate. Norman wants to be free of the Goblin persona, so he's willing to do his best. Otto doesn't want to help, but the fact that Peter's still controlling his arms it means that he really doesn't have a choice. Sandman just wants to go home to his daughter. Electro, again, similar case. He doesn't really have a choice because going back means he'll die. And the Lizard, he's just along for the ride, since in Amazing Spider-Man 1, the Lizard persona pretty much subsumed Dr. Connors' own personality, and he wanted to turn New York into lizards. As such, they need to find a way around this. As such, they move pretty much the majority of the party to Happy's apartment without lending a helping hand. As such, the Sandman, Doc Ock, Electro, and Norman all go out with Peter and Aunt May to the apartment, while the Lizard stays behind in the truck that they took to get there. As such, with the components in the apartment, because one of the things that came up earlier in the movie was how Happy was still facing charges for stolen Stark Tech, and while Peter was bumming around the apartment, he found the stolen Stark Tech. Peter goes into a back room, and with Norman's help, they begin working on trying to find ways to reverse what happened to each of the villains. And the first person they start with is Doc Ock, and sure enough, Peter and Norman's expertise do come together, and they're able to find a way to fix Doc Ock. Because in the second move, in Spider-Man 2, what made Doc Ock go insane was that the inhibitor chip for his mental tentacles, it was fried. Because the inhibitor chip allowed protected Otto's higher brain function, since the tentacles had their own little AI. And so to ensure the AI didn't dominate his own psyche, the inhibitor chip was put in place, and unfortunately in the accident with his first reactor, everything went awry and the chip was fried, which resulted in him becoming Dr. Octopus. However, Peter and Norman are able to find this, and using the accumulated Stark Tech, they're able to actually create a replacement chip, which, does restore Otto's consciousness. And in the instant he comes back, he is super grateful, to the point where he actually gives the nanotech machines back to Peter in the form of a spider that goes over his original costume, which has now been washed because Aunt May offered to wash it earlier in the film. So, yeah, actually a cool suit. As such, with Otto and Norman working with Peter, they begin trying to find ways of fixing the other villains. However, with all this in mind, everyone is still a little edgy. For example, Max Electro is seeing the fact that he's in another universe's opportunity. He tasted the energy in this universe and he wants more of it. He sees this as endless possibility, and again, part of the reason why he became a villain in Amazing Spider-Man 2 was because he was a nobody who suddenly became a somebody. And he thinks that if he suddenly loses all that power, he will go back to being forgotten and alone. It especially helps that when he entered Happy's apartment, he sensed a strange power that he wanted to tap into. And sure enough, it was a mini arc reactor, like the one that Tony used for his suit. So it was powering one of the machines in the back, the machine that Peter used to create his current suit. So, and yeah, he's got his eye on it. In the meantime, though, we get some nice little character stuff between the other villains, as Electro and Sandman do end up telling about their respective positions and what motivates them, etc. But sure enough, Peter, Otto, and Norman are able to work together to try and find ways to cure everybody else. They're able to create this machine that's supposed to drain the electricity from Electro, only leaving the essential electricity, so he'll be depowered. They're trying to find a way to create an anti-Goblin serum to rid Norman of his personality. However, as they're all working, Otto says, "Are you happy, Norman? Soon you're going to be whole. You'll be free. You'll be free. You'll be free from your other half." And Norman, when he hears that, suddenly avoids eye contact with the good Octavius. And sure enough, things do end up getting worse, as earlier in the movie, while Peter was transporting Norman, someone that worked for J. Jonah Jameson was tailing Peter, because, as you do, since Jonah was the one that broadcast the story, he's been cashing in on Peter and had guys spying on him. And with all the moving around Peter's done, this guy has been telling Jonah where exactly Peter is, so Jonah's here to get a story and try and find evidence of Spider-Man doing more heinous stuff. And of course, the Lizard is at street level, because that's when Jameson comes in. He hears all this and realizes that things are going to go down. And sure enough, back in the apartment, as Peter is working with Otto, his spider sense begins tingling again. Only based on the way Peter's moving around, it's kind of off. Peter's just looking around the apartment and looking at each of the villains, and they're all just confused and concerned. And as he looks around, his eyes land on Norman, and he webs his hand to the back of a wall. And Norman's response is, "That little sense of yours is a nice trick." That's not word for word, mind you, but the meaning is clear. Norman is not in the driver's seat right now. Excuse me a sec, dog. Sorry about that, dog. And also, yeah, I got a new back. I just put up different back support for the camera. Sorry. Oh, anyway, whatever. Like I said, Norman's no longer in control. The Green Goblin is, and put simply, he doesn't want to be fixed. He thinks that he's fine exactly the way he is, and that the rest of them are too. That all their powers, they're not curses, they're gifts, that they can use them however they want. They shouldn't be held back by the curse of morality. And he even makes a comment about how May has infected Peter with her morality, which is affecting his decisions, etc. I can't give the line justice. I recommend just watching the movie. And if I can give another comment here, Willem Dafoe is amazing as the Green Goblin. He was perfectly cast in Spider-Man 1. He is perfectly cast here as well. Every single one of the Green Goblin's lines is quotable. It's so well executed. They're all so slimy and villainous, yet so evil and well thought out. It's clear he loves the sound of his voice, and he wants you to hate him. And he does it so gloriously. Every single line is oozing with slime and malice and just diabolical giddiness. It's just so many good lines with him, and I could not write, and I wanted to write all of them down. I did, but I was in a theater, so I couldn't copy every line. But there was one that I was able to get. He talks about how Peter wants to get everything for himself. How he wants everything. But he has to choose between these different sides. And how he caps off that line: gods don't have to choose. We take. This in turn inspires Electro to say, screw this cure, rip off the device that would have taken away his electricity, and uses his own powers to call out to the arc reactor and use that to juice himself up. And with the added power, he blows a hole in the apartment, which he uses to escape. Oh, actually, no. He blasts Otto out. He blasts Otto out of a wall because Otto tried to stop him. And then he goes out of the wall to escape. And sure enough, with that, the other villains make a runaway too. With the Sandman just pretty much saying, "Screw this place, I'm out." Doc Ock having to recuperate himself and realizing he can't go back in there, so he just runs away. And as for the Lizard, well, he realizes that everything went to hell in a handbasket, so he broke out of the truck and is now making a run for it. In the meantime, though, Peter is left in the apartment fighting the Green Goblin, and it's a brutal battle. The Goblin just relishing every punch and attack in every way, shape, and form, whether he's giving or receiving. And it just goes all across the apartment building. It trashes the room, it trashes the hallway, and with the Goblin's enhanced strength, he's able to punch Peter through walls, through floors, and they keep crashing down as they go through floor to floor to floor until they end up in the lobby, and the Goblin has Peter in a chokehold. However, Aunt May, realizing that the Goblin is a problem, was proactive and grabbed the anti-Goblin serum. And as such, while the Goblin is trying to strangle Peter, she runs up and manages to inject him with it. Only it doesn't work. All it does is piss him off. As such, since he considers Aunt May to be the source of Peter's morality, that all he has to do is take her out of the equation, and it'll push Peter over the edge. And so he calls his glider in, because Norman hit it earlier in the movie, and so he jumps on top of it, knocks her, which in turn throws her aside because she was directly in its flight path. And so he looks at Peter and says, "No good deed goes unpunished. You can thank me later." And he takes a pumpkin bomb and throws it right at Aunt May. And while Peter tries intercepting it, the damage is done. It results in a huge explosion that sends Peter and Aunt May flying, reduces the lobby to rubble, and the Goblin flies away, throwing 2 pumpkin bombs at 2 nearby policemen who arrived because Jonah called in the cleanup crew. Damage control. Yes, that was who they called. I even said the name earlier. And while Happy is there to try and deal the damage because he saw Peter bring in the villains due to security camera, the instant he arrives, he's arrested as well, and Peter, in the meantime, is still kind of disoriented after the battle. He manages to find Aunt May, and she seems a little out of it herself, but for the most part, she seems fine. As such, Peter's just kind of blaming himself, saying he should have just sent everyone back, but Aunt May tells him, no, you did the right thing, you tried to help them, and that is great. And Peter just says, no, I shouldn't have listened. I should have done something else. And Aunt May is just kind of aghast at this and says, like, you should have just done nothing, that you should actually listen to him. Listen. And I did actually write this line down because it is powerful. And if anyone who knows Spider-Man lore knows why it is powerful. Aunt May says, you have a gift. You have a power. And with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And as she says this, Peter tells her maybe they should walk away until she suddenly collapses. Remember when I said she looked mostly fine? She only looked it. As while Peter is holding her body, he holds up his hand and it's covered in blood. And that's when Peter realizes that his aunt is dying. And immediately he's afraid. He tries telling Aunt May that it's all fine, she's all good, she'll make it out of here, and then he immediately starts yelling for someone outside to help. Tries saying, come on, but meanwhile Aunt May is just lying there and says, Peter, I think I just need to take a breather. Peter says, no, it's fine, just take a rest, it's fine, you'll be fine, you're okay. And as Aunt May lies down, she takes her last breath. And Peter is just left there, holding her body, crying, angry, and sad. Ultimately, he doesn't have a lot of time left to mourn as damage control comes in and begins opening fire on Peter. And while he's able to run away, unfortunately, the damage is done. The villains are still out there. A good chunk of them are ready to kill. And Jonah is, of course, blaming all of this on Spider-Man, talking about how he leaves a trail of victims in his path, and everybody else is the ones that suffer. And we see Peter watching this news broadcast, and the look on his face makes it clear that he agrees completely. In the meantime, though, we cut back to Ned and MJ. You see, before Peter undertook his little escapade to try and redeem the villains, he gave the box containing the spell back to MJ and said that if anything goes wrong or they didn't hear from him, she just needs to press the button and undo the spell. And the thing is, MJ and Ned have been sitting at Ned's house for a while now, and they have not heard a peep. And considering that the news is talking about all the mayhem that went down at Happy's apartment building, they're worried, and they're worried, and MJ is even considering pressing the button. However, Ned is just wondering, but Ned is of course worried about Peter and says he wants to see him. Well, it turns out, I think someone's listening to that because there's a spark of a portal. You see, after Peter took Doctor Strange's sling ring, he gave it to Ned for safekeeping, and Ned's been wearing it on his hand ever since. And so as Ned is talking about wanting to see Peter and waving his hand, it results in it starts having the makings of a sling ring gateway. MJ and Ned notice this, and so they begin actively trying to get a gateway open. And so Ned keeps saying, I want to see Peter Parker. I want to see Peter Parker. Please bring me to him. And he's doing the incantation, doing the hand swivel thing. And sure enough, he opens a gateway, and on the other side looks like Spider-Man. And so immediately MJ and Ned are like, come on, come through. And they see the guy come running through, and he manages to jump through to the other side. And he's Spider-Man, but it's clearly not the right one. And sure enough, as he unmasks, the guy underneath ain't Tom Holland. And so yeah, this was one of the major reasons why I said you had to go see the movie before you watched this vlog. Because the rumors were true, people. Andrew Garfield from the Amazing Spider-Man duology is back in this movie reprising his role. And not just him. Because as MJ and Ned begin questioning him about his identity as Spider-Man / Peter Parker, they decided maybe they should try it again. Open another gateway to say they want to see Peter Parker. And they do manage to open another one. And in steps our next visitor. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. And who does confirm it's him, as once Andrew Garfield and Mr. Maguire see each other, they both immediately shoot webs at each other, flip to avoid their shots, and Maguire, in a show of forethought, ends up webbing up Andrew Garfield's other web shooter. So yeah, not only are the villains in the previous Spider-Man films here, but so are the Spider-Men from those movies. Needless to say, I went apeshit when these guys walked in, because and honestly, I suspected they were in the movies. Here, with the rumors that were circling around the internet of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield being in this movie, all the little hints or leaks that came out that confirmed or denied this, everybody was going nuts about it. And no matter how often the studio was asked about it, the rumors were never confirmed. Nobody would talk about them, and anytime they were brought up, they were either pushed aside, or in some cases, the cast had to actively lie, as Andrew Garfield was on a talk show. I forgot what it was. I know his name, but I forgot what it was called. I really don't remember. I'll probably remember after the vlog is over. But he was actually on a talk show. And they brought up one of the leaks involving one of the pictures from the set, and Andrew Garfield had to just flat out lie and say, no, that's photoshopped, I'm not in the movie. It's awesome, and it's amazing. I gotta give props to all these actors for doing their best to keep this a secret to the point where they had to outright lie about it, because holy shit, this is amazing. And like I said, I suspected the rumors were true because I heard people gushing about how awesome this movie was. And considering how prominent those rumors were on the internet, because if they had not been true, if it turns out that neither of these characters were in this movie, I think everybody would have lost their collective shit in the worst way possible. Like, oh, they bring in all these previous villains, but not the actual Spider-Man? That's lame. That's just dumb. But sure enough, they did get the actual Spider-Man. And they are fresh off the ends of their other movies. Okay, not fresh off. Clearly time has passed for both Spideys. But, yeah. Both of them are back. And it is amazing. As such, it turns out that both Peters have been aware of the fact that they're in the wrong universe for at least a day now. And both have been looking for the MCU Spider-Man, which I'm just going to say this right now. To try and distinguish the various Spideys, I'm gonna give each of them a nickname. I know in the movie they go by Spider-Man 1 or 2 or 3, but I'm not gonna do that. So instead, my own nicknames will be, for Tobey Maguire, I'm gonna call him the Raimi Spider-Man, since those are the Sam Raimi trilogy. For Andrew Garfield, it'll be Amazing Spider-Man, since those are the name of his movies. And for Tom Holland, MCU Spider-Man, since he's part of the MCU. But bottom line, both Raimi Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man have been looking for their MCU counterpart because they think that he might be in danger, and their spider senses have been going off and letting them know that. As such, with the knowledge of how everything went down, MJ and Ned think that he might want to be alone, and both Peters are like, well, is there a place that he want to go to try and get away from the world? And MJ immediately says there is a place, and sure enough, Peter is resting on top of his high school, crying and clearly in despair. MJ and Ned do manage to catch up with him, and they do share this intimate group hug as Peter is just outwardly blaming himself for what happened to Aunt May. But as they're hugging, MJ alerts MCU Peter to his counterparts who are nearby, who both immediately swoop in and try to talk to their MCU counterpart. Unfortunately, MCU Spidey isn't exactly in a talking mood, as he says, I don't want to hear about how you feel the same way I do. I'm just done. I'm just gonna take that box and I'm gonna send them back, and from there, they're your problem. And whether you kill them, that's on you, not me. As such, he tries to take the box from MJ, but MJ is just keeping it out of his reach. And sure enough, both of the Spideys begin talking about how they've also gone through similar situations. like Andrew Garfield starts talking about how when in his own films he tried saving his girlfriend Gwen Stacy and unfortunately he failed to save her. How he blames himself, and no matter what he does he can't get over it. And while he did try to go on to continue being his universe's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the anger just kept boiling up to the point where at some point he stopped pulling his punches, which I'm guessing happened at some point after the events of Amazing Spider-Man 2. So yeah, that's kind of scary to see. And on top of that, Tobey Maguire begins relating the, of course, regular tragic backstory of Spider-Man, Uncle Ben. How after his Uncle Ben was killed, he wanted to find the man who he thought was his killer and well, make him pay. And yeah, he did eventually do that, but it didn't make the pain go away. And sure enough, it's just a nice way of both Spideys relating to their MCU counterpart and telling him, this pain is normal, but anger is not going to fix it. It's not going to make it go away. It's just going to make it worse. And yeah, MCU Peter does confirm that, how he wants to find the Goblin and kill him. But he knows that's not what Aunt May would want, and how he keeps remembering her last words, that with great power there must also come great responsibility. And once he says that actually resonates with the other two Peters because, well, that's what Uncle Ben said before he died. And so, with that message in mind, it does give MCU Peter's resolve again, and the other two Peters are like, maybe she didn't die for nothing after all. As such, all three Spideys end up working together because now that they're together, they realize that they do need to follow through with what Aunt May wanted. They need to cure these villains before they send them back. As such, all the three Peters, MJ, and Ned end up going into the high school's lab, and they begin all working on various ways to cure the villains. With Raimi Spider-Man working on an anti-Goblin cure because apparently he's had a lot of time to try and figure it out. With Amazing Spider-Man trying to find a way to cure the Lizard because, well, he's already done that in his own films. And pretty much they're all just trying to, and as such, they're both using whatever means they can to try and find ways to reverse Electro and the Sandman's afflictions, with them having to repair that little thing that they use on Electro that drained his power, and as well as trying to find a way to reverse the tachyon energy that resulted in the Sandman becoming, well, the Sandman. And the scene is nice. We get some nice little character stuff between Peter and MJ, between Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Peter Parkers, as they both talk about their respective situations, especially considering their social lives and their love lives. We got this one little funny scene with Ned as he talks with Tobey Maguire, who they talk about best friends and how his best friend died in his arms after he tried to kill him. It's all some nice, really good bonding scenes. But at the end of the day, they all manage to find cures to each of the villains. But the problem is, they need to be able to administer the cures. And considering that the villains are out there and a good chunk of them don't want to go home, that's going to be kind of hard to do. As such, they have a little plan in mind. In order to get them away from the city and away from civilians, they decide to relocate the battle to, well, an isolated island, the Statue of Liberty, which throughout the movie they've been talking about in the background about how they're refitting the Statue of Liberty to have a Captain America shield in honor of his sacrifice as well. And so Peter is able to send a live stream message to the Daily Bugle, and it's essentially him telling the villains, "I tried to help you. I want you to realize that, but you got to remember you're probably going to. But I could have killed you, and I didn't." And to emphasize that, he has the box, and he tells everyone, for everyone out there, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, I wish friendly neighborhood Spider-Man some luck. I think I'm going to need it. And so he cuts the message, and the three Peters wait. And sure enough, the villains do take the bait one by one. Hold on a sec, again. Sorry about that. Again, dog. But yeah, the first villain to show up is Electro, who has created a new suit that channels the arc reactor, which I actually do like, which I do think looks kind of cool, especially since when he uses electricity the right way, it makes him look like the comic book Electro, especially with the lightning around his head. After that is the Sandman, who wants the box because he just wants to go home, damn the other guys. And then, of course, there's the Lizard, who also might want to go home. I want to go home because it's clear that because he makes it clear he still plans to turn the city into lizard people. Maybe he just wants to start fresh in the MCU. I don't know. Point is, the villains are here, and they're here to cause shit. And so while the Spider-Men do have some bit of turbulence working together, since two of the Spideys are solo acts in their respective universes, they're able to work something. The three Spideys are able to work something out, and they're able to coordinate a joint effort against the villains one by one, as they're able to use a device to pretty much give Sandman counter radiation that transforms him back into his human form. They are able to expose the lizard to that weird gas, to a gas that undoes his lizard transformation and turns him back into Dr. Connors, which I'm just gonna say right now, there was a missed opportunity with having Tobey Maguire, having Tobey Maguire Spidey realize that was Dr. Connors, and considering that he has his own Dr. Connors, pretty much realize. I feel like there's a missed opportunity there. He could have made a comment about how that's what his Connors could become at some point, and with the intervention of Doc Ock, who comes in to help the Spideys, they're able to rip off the arc reactor and slap that drain device onto his suit, which in turn manages to drain all of his powers and make him normal again. As such, the days seem to be saved, though unfortunately some civilians have been worked into the battle, as in order to try and get the box with the spell away from the villains, Peter threw it into a sling ring portal for Ned and MJ, and unfortunately the lizard saw this, went into the portal before Ned could close it, and chased them onto the Statue of Liberty. On top of that, in their haste to try and get away from the battle, Ned wound up opening another portal back to the mirror dimension, which in turn allowed Doctor Strange to get out and take the spell. And while he's more than ready to undo it again, he does see that Peter's plan is actually working, as all the villains are slowly being turned back to normal. And while he's obviously still irritated and angry, he does see what's going on here, and you do see the edge kind of go away, though he does get a little uneasy when he sees all three Spider-Men together. As such, with most of the villains cured now, he's more than ready to still undo the spell and send everyone back, until the Green Goblin once more shows up and bombards the area with pumpkin bombs, causing several explosions that send everyone flying back, including MJ. Though thankfully the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man is able to swing in and save her, which leads to this really nice moment where he gets kind of teary-eyed because it reminds him of what happened with Gwen. But it's nice, it's nice and sweet, and it helps him kind of get some closure. But unfortunately, in the chaos, the Green Goblin was able to get the box away from Doctor Strange, and while the Spideys and Strange are able to knock him out of the sky enough for him to get the box back, the Goblin doesn't take half measures, as he stuffed a pumpkin bomb in the box, which explodes and releases the spell. And while Strange does his best to contain the spell again, unfortunately, with all the chaos going on around him, he ends up losing his grip on it, and the spell is unleashed in full, opening rips in reality to other dimensions. And while Strange is doing his best to close each of them up, there's too many, and little by little you are seeing figures in the cosmos of the reality starting to slip through. They don't come through fully, but there are some nice outlines in there to make you recognize people. Like there's one that looks like Kraven the Hunter, one that looks like the Scorpion. Hell, there's one that looks like the Rhino. I actually kind of think that's cool, but again, these are, as Strange put it at one point in the movie, these are infinite universes. The only reason that they got the characters they did in this movie was because the spell was active for only a little bit, resulting in only a handful of people slipping through, like these previous Spidey villains and their respective Spider-Men. But with the spell now fully active, everyone from every universe is coming through. And yeah, Strange said the multiverse is infinite. Infinite's a lot of people. So put simply, shit's going down. And unfortunately, Peter's not really on top of all that because he's too busy fighting the Goblin. And the Goblin is still gloating about killing Aunt May, which in turn is still stoking MCU Peter's rage. As such, they get into a very brutal fight, and what helps emphasize that Peter is pissed off is that he is not holding back in this fight. he is not stopping for a minute. And at one point during the battle, when Strange unleashed a spell and knocked off the Captain America shield onto the ground, onto the surrounding island, that's where Peter and the Goblin are fighting. As Peter tries to land a punch down on him, the Goblin dodges out of the way, and Peter ends up causing a massive dent in the shield, which makes it clear that if that had come in contact with the Goblin's head, he would have that his skull would have been splattered all over the underside of that shield. So yeah, this is bad. So yeah, Peter is angry. Something that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire notice immediately. And as such, in the battle, Peter does manage to get the upper hand and knock him down, and he manages to grab the Goblin's glider with the intent of impaling him with it. Before he can do that, Tobey Maguire steps in and stops him, pretty much giving him a look that says, no, that won't help. And this does manage to calm MCU Peter down enough to put the glider down, but it also gives the Goblin ample opportunity to stab Tobey Maguire in the back. However, in his gloating and talking about how Peter's too weak to kill him, etc., Andrew Garfield throws Peter the anti-Goblin serum, and Peter is able to inject it straight into the Goblin's neck, resulting in the Green Goblin personality being completely erased, him losing his super strength, and Norman now back in the driver's seat, who looks upon the scene, looks at the distraught Peter, looks at Tobey Maguire lying on the ground with a wound in his back, and he's just horrified at what's happened. Thankfully, Andrew Garfield is able to come in, and Tobey Maguire says that he's been stabbed before, so he can deal with this, though he does admit later he's in a lot of pain. Unfortunately, though, there's still the matter of the rips in time and space and everybody coming through. Peter goes up to Doctor Strange and tries saying, well, what can we do? Can't you just cast the original spell before I messed it up? But he says that won't help. There's just too many of them. So Peter offers another solution. What if everyone just forgot about Peter Parker? After all, a stipulation of the spell is that it's bringing through everybody who knows who Peter Parker is. Sorry about that. So what if he cast a counter spell that made everyone forget about Peter Parker? Not that everyone would forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but just everyone would forget Peter Parker. Strange admits that probably would do it, but he's not willing to cast the spell. Because, again, nobody would know who he was. He would be a non-person. Everything about him would be erased, which I'm assuming that would mean records as well. I'll get to that when I'm done with the summary, but needless to say, if this spell goes through, then Peter Parker will be as good as erased. He'll still be around, of course, but nobody will know a thing about him. Nothing about him. They'll have memories of Spider-Man, just not Peter Parker. And as such, yeah, Strange isn't willing to cast that spell, but Peter tells him it's the only way. This is his mess. He has to take responsibility for it. And Strange reluctantly agrees to this. As such, he begins casting the counter spell. And so Peter goes down to MJ and Ned and talks to them and tells them what's going to happen. And neither of them are exactly happy with this, but ultimately Peter just tells them it's going to be okay. And after he shares a kiss with MJ, she tells him, when everything is said and done, I want you to find me, or I'm just going to figure it out again. I figured it out once, I can do it again. Peter says he can, and so he does manage to say his goodbyes to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. He's glad he met them. He's glad he met them. It's all nice and it's all hugs around. And so he ends up swinging away as Strange casts the new spell. The end result, one by one, each of the various supervillains disappear, as well as their respective Spider-Men. And in the meantime, Peter swings away we see Peter swinging away, and the spell is cast, encompassing the whole world. And to confirm that the spell worked, we cut it back with J. Jonah Jameson as he's covering the fight at the Statue of Liberty, and talking about how Spider-Man isn't a hero because he hides his face behind a mask, and only true heroes would tell the world who they are. So yeah, nobody remembers Peter Parker anymore. Hold on a sec, I feel another sneeze coming on. Sorry, I had to get that out. In the meantime, though, and while Peter does plan to tell MJ who he is and what their connection was, when he goes to see her at the diner, he sees that her and Ned's lives are now better, that they've managed to get into MIT, they're going to go there together, they're still friends. And while he originally planned to introduce himself to MJ and tell her everything, he sees how happy she is, and he sees a wound that she sustained on her head from all the fighting, now looking like it's healed up, and Peter decides not to say anything. He just takes a coffee that he ordered and leaves the building, with MJ and Ned with just talking and socializing like friends. In the meantime, Peter goes to visit Aunt May's grave, and he has a little moment with Happy, and Happy doesn't recognize him either, but Happy does still clearly remember some of the time he spent with him as Spider-Man, as they both talk about how they knew May through Spider-Man, and how, while she may be gone, everything she stood for won't go away with her, that Spider-Man will keep it going. And as such, the film ends with Peter moving into a dingy little apartment, and as we see him moving his stuff, we see that he's studying for the GEDs, since obviously he had to drop out of school. But at the end of the day, he's still fighting, as we see him sewing together a new Spider-Man suit, which actually looks really cool. He's got police alerts on his phone all set up, and we see him jumping out of his apartment window to swing around New York, ready to continue on his journey of power and responsibility as the Amazing Spider-Man. But, as you do, this is an MCU movie, so there are after credits scenes. And the first one is actually actually ties into a previous vlog that we've done, as we cut to a bar in Mexico, and who is sitting at the bar but Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock from the Venom duology. Yep. Remember if you remember the after credits scene for Venom Let There Be Carnage, we saw that he got ported over to the MCU, and this after credits scene reveals that what ported him over was Doctor Strange's spell. Kind of weird that he's brought over, because the specificity of the spell was that it brought over anybody that knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and to my knowledge, Eddie never once encountered Spider-Man in those films, but Venom did have some familiarity with Spider-Man when he saw the news broadcast that outed him. So, in that same after credits scene, Venom mentioned how he had a hive mind of knowledge across galaxies and universes. So, you could make the argument that the Venom symbiote had encountered Spider-Man before and probably remembered him. Though if the Venom does, he's not telling anybody, because apparently the entire time that Eddie Brock has been in the MCU, he's just been gathering information, talking with a bartender about everything, and it's here that he learns about Iron Man, about the Hulk, about Thanos, and how he wiped out half the universe and how those people were just gone for 5 years. As such, Eddie just decides to resolve to go to New York and talk with Spider-Man, but they're drunk. But he and Venom are drunk, clearly having taken quite a few drinks while they're at the bar. Unfortunately, though, before they can actually do anything, that's when the counterspell is cast, and sure enough, Eddie disappears, which is disappointing, especially since at the end of Let There Be Carnage, they were hinting at Venom and Spider-Man eventually clashing. But that may come sooner rather than later. As after Eddie disappears, the bartender, of course, is angry that he didn't pay his tab, which I find is hilarious. Just because it makes sense. Of course, you probably have that reaction in the Marvel Universe. But as he's walking away grumbling about that, we see a black little speck on the bar. It looks unmoving, and as the camera closes in on it, we see the speck starting to move. The Venom symbiote left a little bit of itself behind. And since Spider-Man is still around, there is a very high chance that he'll be encountering it at some point in the future. And as for the other after credits scene, I'll save that for the end. It's kind of important, because that's kind of where it kind of needs to be. So, yeah. Overall, I still really love this movie. It is, honest to God, even after a second viewing, still really damn good. Yes, like I said, a lot of the hype that I felt from the first viewing has worn off between then and now, but that does not mean the film has suddenly turned bad. No, far from it. I think it is still a really damn good movie. And honest to God, I think it's a contender for my favorite MCU film. It might just beat Ragnarok in that regard. And how it works that way is in terms of the story and why does it work that way? Well, first let's look at it from from Peter's perspective, from the storytelling angle. How this film, one of the things that I mentioned when it comes to the MCU trilogy of Spider-Man films is how it talks about Peter maturing as not just a superhero, but as a person. And each film has shown a step in that journey in one way or another. Spider-Man Homecoming dealt with Peter as an up-and-coming superhero who wanted to prove himself to the big names, that he deserved to stand alongside with them, but how at the end of the day, the moral was that he needed to, not that he had to stand on his own merits, how he couldn't just be like, how if he wanted to be Spider-Man, he needed to actually focus on his own strengths, what he could handle, and work up to that. And it made him realize that maybe that he doesn't need to prove himself to anybody, that he can still be himself, that he can stand on his own, that he doesn't need to have a fancy suit to be Spider-Man. And thus that's what the film is about. Far From Home dealt with him in the fallout from Tony Stark's death, how people were constantly putting pressure on him to take over as the new Tony Stark / Iron Man, but how at the end of the day he realized he had to stand on his own merits, not just fill in the shoes of someone else. He had to be he had to be his own hero. He had to be his own person. He couldn't be Tony Stark. He had to be Peter Parker. He couldn't be Iron Man. He had to be Spider-Man, and that's what the film was all about. Peter realizing what made him strong, not just what someone else gave him and what he had to do. And this film, what No Way Home does, is that it brings it full circle. It shows Peter actually accepting the responsibility of being a hero and the consequences that can come from that. The conflict of this movie all stemmed from Peter wanting to live two different lives. From Peter making a stupid, ill-thought-out decision which almost led to cataclysmic results. And how is the conflict resolved? By Peter accepting full responsibility. He realizes what he did, and he knows that if he wants to fix it, he needs to own up to his mistake. Even though he knows that by doing that would result in pretty much his whole life being erased. And he's okay with that. Well, okay, maybe not fully okay, but but even if he isn't, he knows it's the right thing to do. And even while he wants to shirk off the responsibility of trying to help the villains, because in trying to help them, someone close to him was killed. He tries to say, "This is all my fault. I'm wiping my hands of it," but Aunt May tells him, "What you do? You tried to help these people. Yes, it resulted in all of this, but don't ever think that you did the wrong thing for trying that." And throughout the film, and throughout the third act of the film, Peter is still constantly beating himself up over it, but through the support of his friends and the other Spider-Men, it slowly helps him deal with that trauma and that fear. Especially since part of what helped him accept that was Aunt May's final words to Peter. That with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And you may be confused why I looked at my notes while repeating that line, because it is such a deeply ingrained line in the Spider-Man mythos that why should I need to look at a note in order to get that? But the thing is, it's how she worded it. She actually, because Aunt May took the quote directly from the comics, the way Stan Lee originally wrote it, and that's how he had originally written it. That with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And so I did take great pains to write that down exactly as she said it. So, yeah, of course I'm going to look back at these. But the fact that she's the one that imparted the knowledge, it fits with almost every form of tragedy. One of the things that makes Spider-Man strong is how he turns tragedy into strength. How he learns from his mistakes and uses that to grow. Now, admittedly, the comics kind of stagnate with Peter in that regard, because he's had to constantly beat himself up for it a long time, but again, what makes Spider-Man strong is that he takes that pain, uses that and realizes, I made a mistake. I'm never going to do that again. He takes the pain from his losses and uses that to fuel his actions going forward, to ensure that no one else suffers the way he does. That with his great power, there comes a great responsibility, that he needs to accept that responsibility, because if he doesn't, as Peter himself said in Captain America Civil War, when the bad things happen and you can stop, bad things happen and bad things happen, you can stop them and you don't, it leads to people getting hurt. Again, that might not be, I don't think that's word for word what he said in the movie, but yeah, that's the root of Spider-Man. Someone who sees bad things, knows he has the power to stop them, and acting. And the film shows an unbelievable level of maturity from Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Like I said, he blames himself for these actions, and yeah, they are kind of his fault. He's the one that was pigheaded enough to get Doctor Strange to cast the spell. He was the one that invited the villains into Happy's apartment, and as a result, the shit hit the fan hard, and things almost went to hell in a handbasket. And it was only by Peter sacrificing his life that things were finally put right. But unlike with Iron Man, who was revered after his death, Peter is still around. Peter is not dead, and nobody knows his sacrifice. Nobody can know his sacrifice. Nobody is allowed to know his sacrifice, because in order for the spell to work, nobody can remember him. Which leads to an honestly tragic but powerful ending, where Peter is still willing to fight, but he has no one now. Aunt May is dead. His best friend and his girlfriend have no idea who the hell he is, and while the rest of the world may remember Spider-Man, Peter Parker is now a non-person. It's tragic, but the fact that he's still willing to fight, that he's still willing to put on his suit and go out there and try and make the world a better place, that is Spider-Man. That he sees the pain and he's still willing to keep going because he knows that's what Aunt May would have wanted. And that is just powerful. And the whole film is just Peter taking that level of maturity, him learning about the full ramifications of what it means to be a superhero. That yes, there will be victories, but the losses you will suffer will be the greatest. And ultimately, fighting through those losses, fighting through that pain, it's the greatest battle you will ever face. But it's a one you have to fight. And I like that. It's strong, it's mature, and it ultimately brings Tom Holland's Spider-Man's journey to a full circle. He's fully matured into the role of Spider-Man. He's not just a kid from Queens who got a suit and decided to start punching bad guys. He is a full-time superhero, and this is the life he has chosen, for good and for ill. And I think that's perfect. Also, speaking of tragedy, I love the Aunt May death scene hurt. I'm not kidding. Like, you can say whatever you want about the casting for Aunt May in the MCU. That the actress was too young. How Aunt May is supposed to be an older lady. How she's supposed to be a more parental figure, yet this Aunt May is younger, more attractive, and just kind of more attractive, and is trying to be more hip and so forth. Well, the thing is, her death works. And it works well. Because it hurts. Say what you want about the acting, but one of the strengths of the Spider-Man MCU trilogy was the relationship that Peter had with his Aunt May in the movies. While she may not have been the same older parental figure that she was in the comics, she was still Peter's greatest support system. She was always there to help him. In Spider-Man Homecoming, when Peter was having his issues with dueling his Peter Parker identity and his Spider-Man identity, she knew that something was wrong and tried to pretty much relate to him, tried to coax it out of him by letting him know if he needs to talk about something, she's always there for him. Or how in Far From Home, how she was supportive of Peter's role as Spider-Man to the point where she wanted to help him improve, continue on. And even when he went on his vacation and tried to not pack the suit, she packed it for him anyway because she knows he might need it somewhere. And in this film, she's the one that pushes for Peter to keep doing the right thing. She says, "These people need your help, and you need to keep going." And when she's ultimately the one that delivers great power with great responsibility line, it hits hard. And it carries the same weight that Uncle Ben's death carried in the first Spider-Man movie. because this is a parental figure that supported Peter, showed him love, and again, just like with Uncle Ben, her death is technically his fault, so it still hits hard, and it makes the line stick further in Peter's mind. That's what keeps him to keep going forward. Again, I'm sorry I gushed about this already, but that scene just hurt. Whatever you say about the actress they picked to play Aunt May, that scene hurt because you saw the raw emotion and pain going through Peter's mind as she died. And she was doing her best to still try and be there for Peter even in her last moments. That's heart-wrenching, man. I'm sorry, but that is effing heart-wrenching. That I think worked well, and I think it helps continue showcasing the growth that Peter went through. On top of that, another thing that I think works in the film is how it continues other characters' stories as well. Because the film is a crossover with the Raimi Spider-Man movies and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, it allows you to check back in with the characters from those movies. And I gushed about this already when I talked about the villains and seeing them interact, but it really does work. Seeing these actors come back to reprise their roles and actually have them continue on their character arcs, I think is very interesting. Alfred Molina still turns in a great performance as Doc Ock, even though he said he just came back for the money. But you know what? That's good. He's got to eat, so whatever. But he still turns in a powerhouse performance as Doc Ock, and he does spectacularly. When Peter manages to free him from the control of his arms, you can see the unelated joy on his face as he realizes the voices in his head are gone, and just how thankful he is to finally just be himself again. That's honestly sweet and just so happy. I liked seeing Jamie Foxx as Electro, as now he's not playing him as a desperate guy who's high on his own power or a dweeb. He's now more confident in the role, a bit more put together, but there's still enough of his original performance in there so that lets you know it's the same guy. Because, again, what drives this version of Electro forward is that he doesn't want to be forgotten. He doesn't want to be ignored. And he thinks that if he loses his power, that's what he's going to be. And that's why he wants to stay in the MCU. Because here, the power is more intoxicating. It makes him better. It's different than what he's used to. Especially since the power in the MCU restored him to his regular human form instead of being the big blue guy that we saw in Amazing Spider-Man 2. He's perfectly happy with where he is here. And he doesn't want his power gone. And so, as a result, he's willing to put his best foot forward, and he seems more confident in the role because of it. And I think I like that, because when he feels more confident, it makes him feel more powerful. Plus, he gets some good jokes and jabs in, like when Peter gives him that little thing that's supposed to drain him his powers. He's like, "I just have one question: are those your Legos?" And he points to like a destroyed Death Star that was broken earlier in the movie. I thought that was hilarious. And I love the other thing too. It's like this place is just. It's like this place, man. I was like, what are you talking about? The apartment? It's like, yeah, I like the apartment. It's got a nice feng shui. No, I'm talking about the universe. I love that. That's just a funny line. It works, and it especially helps when you have the other villains thrown in there, like with the Sandman. Yeah, while I'm talking about it, yeah, that's the thing. That's the elephant in the room. You never see Sandman or the Lizard in their human forms. Well, a lot in the movie. We do see them in their human forms at the end. But they're stock images. They're probably taken from the original movies. Because, yeah, because I've heard that the actors for Sandman and Dr. Connors did come back to reprise their roles. They never really had any on-screen roles, which I don't know. Because apparently when it comes to like Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe, they had to digitally de-age them to make them look like how they looked in their original movies. So I guess maybe those two actors had aged so much that they couldn't be used like that. So if that's the case, that is kind of disappointing, but maybe understandable. But I hope because I'm hoping that they are the original actors. Because why would you go to all the effort of getting all these other actors from previous films back and not go to the trouble of getting these two back? But yeah, that's my tangent. I'm talking about the Sandman. Again, it's cool to see him in here, and he's still written strong. He is, of course, still in the supervillain role because even the Sandman in the original movie was a little distrusting. He only believed in himself. He did believe in himself, but at the end of his heart, there was a decent guy there, and that's showcased here. ultimately, he doesn't care about wanting to fix the other villains. He just wants to go home. And while he did briefly help Spider-Man in the beginning of the movie, again, his main motivation is that he just wants to go back home because he has a daughter there that he loves and misses. And when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, why he wants to get the spell so that he can out and do it himself. He wants to just go back. Damn the rest of these guys. He just wants to be fit. Damn the rest of these guys. He just wants to hold his daughter in his arms again, which is sweet. I like that, but the lengths he's going to try and make it happen still make him the bad guy here. So yeah, he's written well. And of course, let's get to of course, there's Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, still plays him perfectly. But let's get to one of my favorite performances in this movie. Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin. I already said this before, but he was perfect casting for him in both the original Raimi trilogy and in here, because he plays it so damn perfectly. He's so creepy and malicious and just loving every second of it. Every single line is quotable. Every single utterance so weird. And the thing is, for most of the movie, he does not have his goblin mask. Early in the movie, while Norman was in control, he smashed the damn thing because the goblin was tormenting him. And so, as a result, whenever the Green Goblin is in control, you're able to see Willem Dafoe use more of his facial acting and physical and facial expressions to convey what the goblin is feeling. And he looks like he's having a goddamn ball in this movie. And you know what? It is so damn great seeing him portray him like that, having fun as the villain, looking all sad when he's doing these horrible things, or gleeful as he's causing misery. He is just so damn amazing in the movie, and I'm glad that they got him back at least. That was perfect casting, both in the original film and here. Just love it. Just abso-friggin-lutely love it. And while we're on the topic of other great characters, of course I mentioned how it was cool to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come back to play their respective Spideys. And of course, both turn in great performances. And another thing that I actually liked about seeing all three Spider-Men in the same room together is that you're able to notice how different and yet similar all three of them are. Like, I took notes about it too, so let me just get this out. All three of them are different, but still recognizable enough as Spider-Man. But, like, for example, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, while definitely having fun in the role, is definitely like the more mature and aged one out of all of them. He's clearly the oldest, and he's had the most experience in the role, so he feels more calm and more mature. Takes the job a bit more seriously than his other two counterparts. He's clearly having fun, of course, and that transfers well with the other Spideys. But he's clearly more of the mentor to their trio. Then we got Andrew Garfield. He's definitely the more emotional of all of the other Spider-Men. More of the physically expressive, more happy. And and that's expressed especially in the fights. Even while facing all these villains, he's like, oh, hey, remember me? It's nice to see you. Because that's another thing that transfers over from the Amazing Spider-Man duology. He was great as Spider-Man. He was quipping, he was having fun, and that transfers well even into this movie. Even during all the serious bits, he's still clearly trying to have fun and trying to get everyone in the sense of it. And I also love when Electro sees his Spider-Man, he knows immediately, oh, I'm going to enjoy killing you. Which I thought was really nice. And of course, it also brings us to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He's the most wide-eyed and curious of the group because he's the one with the least amount of experience. So he's asking more questions, definitely looking at things more, feeling more. He feels more out of place, but in a good way. Like, he feels like a young student who's still learning from his predecessors, and it's cool seeing him learning and interacting with the other Spider-Men. And while talking about interactions, one thing that I love is the interactions between all three Peters. The instant that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are on screen, they are given just as much screen time as their MCU counterpart. And they're given just as many character moments. They're not just there for the sake of having fan service or whatever. No, they actually recognize that these Spider-Men had their own stories, had their own struggles, and if they're here, that means those stories are going to keep going. And we see more of that. And it's not just Tom Holland working off of them either, and they're working off of each other. There's a scene where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, while working on curing the other villains, see Tom Holland having a moment with MJ. And immediately Andrew Garfield just asked Tobey Maguire, or no, Tobey Maguire asked Andrew Garfield, do you have someone's like, no, don't really have a lot of stuff and too focused on my other life. What about you? And he's like, no, well, it's like, yeah, it's a little difficult, but me and my MJ make it work. It's just a nice little bonding moment as they're both sharing their experiences and seeing how they work together, seeing them all coming together and trying to help each other out and grow as people. And throughout the movie, we see that expressed even further with their interactions with the villains. When Electro is cured and is back to being just plain old Max Dillon, Andrew Garfield goes up to him and tries talking with him, saying, look, tries reassuring him, no, he won't be forgotten, he won't be ignored, he's not a nobody, that he really does matter. Or Andrew Garfield, or Tobey Maguire, that when Tobey Maguire talks about how he's had a lot of time to think about what happened to the Green Goblin, because he's clearly carrying guilt about what happened originally in his universe. So now having the opportunity to actually make amends and stop that horrible thing from happening this time, it helps fuel him. And part of what makes Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire work is that they're doing their best to ensure that the MCU Spider-Man doesn't repeat their mistakes. I like that. It's sweet and makes everything just feel more complete. Especially since both of them have their own little defining character moments, like when MJ got knocked out of the Statue of Liberty and it's Andrew Garfield who comes in to save her, which honestly, the best actor in this whole film is Andrew Garfield. He still turns in a very great performance as the Amazing Spider-Man Peter Parker. He's very emotional, and it's clear that the pain he's been feeling, it's still having an effect on him. While he acts most positive out of all of them, underneath that positivity, there is pain. And when that pain comes to the surface, it looks like that he's doing everything in his power to just hold it together. You can see him getting ready to go teary-eyed. You can see him holding it in, but you still see him, and when he does, and when you do see it come out briefly, it's heart-wrenching. Especially when he talks about what happened to Gwen and how he stopped pulling his punches, or when he finally saves MJ and she thanks him, you can see the elated joy on his face, knowing that he was actually able to save someone, especially someone who was the sweetheart to this universe's Spider-Man. It works so well. And it just works well. And again, part of what makes this work, and again, it helps showcase that their Spider-Man did matter, and that if they're here too, they got their own stories. They got their own stories going on. So of course, it's cool to see them continued on. I like that, especially liked when and yes, even Tobey Maguire had that with his supervillains as well. Because after Doc Ock got the arc reactor away from Electro, Tobey Maguire came in, and he and Ock recognized each other, and Ock's like, oh, you all grown up. How you been? It's a sweet moment. I love it. And again, all of them turn in fantastic performances. It's honestly like they never left. It's perfect, and I love it. I'm trying to think of anything else, because I already talked about the major thing that I loved, how it feels like this is a complete journey for Peter, how he's continuing to try and fight and actually mature and level out. Of course, the humor is still there, and it works well, especially in the interactions with the Spider-Man. One of my favorite scenes is at the Statue of Liberty while they're waiting for the villains to show up. They're all talking about their respective rogues galleries and their adventures, and Raimi Spider-Man and MCU Spider-Man talk about how they both fought aliens with the Venom symbiote and Thanos, and Andrew Garfield's like, oh, you guys fought aliens? I'm lame. The last guy I fought was a guy in a rhino suit, and then they have a moment, and Tobey Maguire's like, no, what's with the self-hate here? You're amazing. I want you to say that. You're amazing. You're amazing. It's really sweet, and they're talking about web shooters. There are honestly a couple funny scenes where Tobey Maguire shows that he has organic web shooters, and both Andrew Garfield and Howard's like, how do you do that? That's amazing. I love it. There's still humor with Flash Thompson trying to cash in on being Peter's quote unquote best friend by even writing a book called Flashpoint about all Peter's journeys, etc. Of course, the action and fight scenes are spectacular. They are still a joy to watch and see, especially when you see these previous villains come back and seeing Spider-Man have to work around them. And of course, the final fight scene on the Statue of Liberty was still amazing and cool to watch. Especially seeing all three Spider-Men have to work together to fight off the villains, seeing them all come together. Seeing them all taking on different battles, seeing them all adapting, it's all still really fun to watch. There's still and it still hits close to home. The tragedy still is there. They do definitely make you feel sympathetic for a good chunk of the characters, especially when you see Norman Osborn at the feast shelter and not knowing, and who's just genuinely afraid because he's in unfamiliar territory. And of course, there's still hilarity when Doctor Strange begins questioning Peter about the obvious things he could have done. Peter's like, wait, I could have done all that? That's actually funny. So, and of course, and again, my favorite fight scene is still the Doctor Strange Spider-Man fight, because that carried the same trippy and just and creativity of the Doctor Strange movie had with their fight scene. So, love that. I'm trying to think if there's a lot. I'm trying to think of what else I liked. Again, the characters all have great performances. All of them have their own great arcs, especially with Peter and him having to grow into his responsibilities about being a superhero and the sacrifices that come with it. It's all well written. It's always got some really well written parts, especially when you have the character interactions between the villains, between Spidey and the villains, between the varying Spider-Man, or Peter and his relationships, especially with MJ. Actually, that's another thing that I love about MJ. That's another thing I love. Peter and MJ have a really well-defined relationship, and throughout the film, you can totally buy that they are boyfriend and girlfriend. Yeah, she's more in your face, more angry, and more assertive than Peter, but she and Peter genuinely do care and love each other. They're supportive of each other. They're helping each other out. When Peter is working with his counterparts to try and find a way to fix the villain, she's there for him and helping him out. It's just all so sweet and kind. And by the end, when she has to forget about Peter too, you can feel your heart breaking as she realizes she doesn't want to forget, but she knows that she kind of has no choice in this regard. So it's all just so sweet and nice, and I love it. And I guess there was a subplot with Ned potentially being of wizard heritage, so that's a thing. Doesn't really go anywhere beyond the sling ring, so whatever. But I'm trying to. So yeah, again, everybody turned in great performances. The writing was on point with some good humor, great character moments, and amazing drama. The action scenes were spectacular. The ending was powerful and showcased Spider-Man the MCU Spider-Man growing into his own. I'm trying to think of anything that I didn't like about it. Well, I guess if I had to, I guess some things would probably be like minor continuity flubs, because again, part of what made Peter reluctant to send all the villains back right away was because he learned that some of them died. But the thing is, some of that required knowledge that should not have been commonplace in their respective universes. Like, for example, Doc Ock talked about how Norman Osborn was dead and how he recognized him as the Green Goblin, which, yeah, he was, but I thought I was under the impression that that nobody knew that Norman Osborn was the Green Goblin. And so I don't think Harry, and before you say, well, of course it would get out, like, yeah, it would get out that he died, but there would not be a lot of knowledge about the Green Goblin and Norman Osborn being one and the same. I thought Harry didn't learn that until later in the second movie. So how did Doc Ock know that? How did the Sandman know it? Because later on he confirms that both the Green Goblin and Doc Ock died, and while it makes sense that he would know about what happened to Doc Ock in his reactor, how would he know about the Green Goblin being Norman Osborn and being impaled by his own glider? That was not common knowledge. And it was Harry Osborn learning that knowledge what finally convinced him that Peter was telling the truth when he said he didn't kill Norman Osborn. So, how is that knowledge? Again, it's a minor continuity hiccup, but it's still weird to see. On top of that, I think another little problem, and this is again a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. The final spell at the end made it so that all collective knowledge of Peter Parker was erased. Does that mean that all records of Peter were erased too? Like, is his birth certificate suddenly just blank? Is anything that mentions him suddenly gone? Are all photos of his existence gone? Did he lose his social security number? Did he lose any bank accounts he had? I'm guessing maybe, but it feels like that's a big thing, because without a lot of that stuff, Peter wouldn't even be able to do a lot of basic stuff that he could do before. He would have to start over, because literally there'd be nothing. So, did the spell erase all that? Did everything about Peter Parker just poof off the face of the planet? Or could someone find out who Peter Parker is by looking through video archives or any records in any high school records? On top of that, would the GED still work? I don't know. I've never taken the GED myself. I did graduate high school and I went to college, so I don't know. But wouldn't there have to be at least some completion there? I don't know. If anyone who's taking a GED, do you need any record of previous schooling in order to get it, or do you just take it? I don't know. So that's kind of a thing. That does kind of be because while it doesn't, well, it makes sense that the spell would erase everyone's knowledge. Does it erase any record of Peter at all? Because they don't specify that. So I think that one definitely stuck out of my head on a second watching. And I think another minor flaw in my opinion, and this is also and this is one that's actually shared with another Avengers with another MCU film, Age of Ultron. While I loved seeing the crossovers with the previous Spider-Man movies, this is the second MCU film that, in order to understand everything and understand and appreciate all that, you had to have seen those movies. So if you're like a new viewer of Spider-Man who started watching the MCU version or maybe just read the comics, a lot unless while it is cool to see these other Spider-Man, unless you're familiar with the characters, I don't think it'll hit the same. I went nuts for these characters, but that's only because I've seen the previous movies. I own every Spider-Man movie that's been made. I own the original Raimi trilogy. I own the Amazing Duology. I own Into the Spider-Verse for crying out loud. And yes, I own the previous two Spider-Man films. They're part of my MCU collection. So that stuff hits to the right spot for someone like me who loves the C character, who loves to see that kind of shit. But if you're only familiar with like one Spider-Man, if you're only familiar with the MCU variety, then while seeing these other Spider-Men will be kind of cool, I don't think it'll really hit the same impact. Now again, they do enough with them so that they are still written like interesting characters, and there is still enough revealed about their stories that I think if you are interested, you could go back and check them out and learn more about them. So I will give you that. But again, I feel like that unless you've seen the previous films, it won't hit as hard. It won't hit the same way as if you were a fan of them. Unless you were a fan of them already. So, yeah, that might be a minor flaw. But aside from like those three things, I think the rest of the film more than holds up. It's got great action. Everything feels fast-paced, stylized, and not at all cluttered. The characters are all well written with great arcs, great interactions, great steps. The acting is spectacular all around. My favorite two performances being Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. And yes, I did say Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, though Tom Holland still does a great job. I'm just saying that I felt like Andrew Garfield hit all the right notes with his performance. It was well written. It was well written. It was well written. The fan service was on point and spectacular. It had great themes. The ending was bittersweet and perfect for the story they were trying to tell. It brings Tom Holland's Spider-Man story full circle. And again, any flaws I can think of are mostly minor. At the end of the day, Spider-Man No Way Home is honestly a very great contender for my favorite MCU Spider-Man movie. And if you have not seen it yet, which I so highly recommend you do, go do it. Go watch it now. Although, like I said, if you haven't seen that movie, then you shouldn't be watching these vlogs. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. Fantastic movie all around. Just a fun time in general. But, of course, there's still more activity in the MCU. Like I said, there was another after credits scene. And this one does tie into the next one. For you see, while next week we shall be going back to the MTV Spider-Man retrospectives, the next time we venture back into the MCU, we're going to see the ramifications of what happened when the former Sorcerer Supreme meddled in the affairs of the multiverse in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'll see you for that video. I hope that the new year treats you well. Happy 2022 to you, and I'll see you next time. Take care.